I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual now. 起立，面向佛堂，参加先鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加各位的传世一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
And 58, like 57, has quite a bit to do with governing the people as well. So no idea why it should be such a coincidence that we're talking about governance at the time that we're getting so close to November, the general election. But here we are. So let's have it. Chapter 58 of the Tao Te Ching, when governing is lackluster, the people are simple and honest. When governing is scrutinizing, the people are shrewd and crafty. Misfortune is what fortune depends upon. Fortune is where misfortune hides beneath. Who knows their ultimate end? They have no determined outcome. Rightness reverts to become strange. Goodness reverts to become wicked. The confusion of people has lasted many long days. Therefore, the sages are righteous without being scathing, incorruptible without being piercing, straightforward without being ruthless, illuminated without being flashy. So, couple of quick commentaries for everyone as we're looking at the overview. When we start out talking about governing being lackluster, it will be natural for us to assume that this is a negative thing that Lao Tzu is talking about. Lackluster, incompetent governance. Well, the original meaning that Lao Tzu wanted to convey was actually government that doesn't interfere with the people's business, in that everything is much more the easygoing vibe. Everything is much more of the do whatever you want as long as you don't hurt one another type of thing. So the quote-unquote lackluster, even though in English it has negative connotations, in the original Chinese, it's actually depicting something that's more tolerant, something that is not so quote-unquote competent that it gets into everyone's business. So where it says scrutinizing, line 3, that's the opposite. That's where you have sort of like NSA on steroids, where you have the government that is so incredibly competent that they are intercepting everyone's communication, that they decrypt all messages, and they can see exactly what you're doing, what you're up to, and they have the software, they have the algorithm to figure out who you are meeting up with, what you may be plotting, etc. So while that is quote-unquote competent, it will be seen in a negative light from the perspective of Lao Tzu. It's actually not a good thing for the government to be so great at doing what it does that it's actually Big Brother, 1984. Okay, so that is the beginning of it, and then the other details that we're going to talk about, we'll get to line by line. So, as you know, the very first thing that we'll do is to look for, on the Chinese side, because Chinese characters line themselves up, every character being the pictograph of the exact same width. So, lines that are meant to go together have the same number of characters and repeating characters. So one of the exercises that I encourage everyone to do is to look at the pictographic Chinese and then look at the lines up and down and notice the similar characters from one line to the next. Even in the same position, even if you can't read Chinese, simply by recognizing similar characters, graphically, you can figure out the pattern of the chapter. So here, I'm going to start with the beginning and the end. So we have seen by now that in every chapter of the Tao Te Ching, there is usually an introductory thought. There's an introductory concept, and then there's also a conclusion. And most of the time, the conclusion maps right back in a gray circle back to the beginning, back to the introduction. In this case, what I've done is that I've highlighted in red the characters that are the same from lines 1 to 4, and in a moment I'll explain exactly what the character is, what it sounds like, the dictionary definition, how it's used. So for now though, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, they begin with the same character in Chinese. So those of you who are more deeply observant may also notice that 1 and 3 have a similar character in the second character, and 2 and 4 have a similar character, in fact, exactly the same character in the second character. So the pattern that you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, is actually 1, 3, 2, 4. Everyone can see that, right? Hopefully everyone can see it. Now, forget about the middle part for the time being. We'll come back to it. Look at the bottom part. You've got 4 lines from 14 to 17. You've got the middle 2 characters being exactly the same. So second character, third character, repeated from 14 down to 17. So when we check back with the English translation, we begin to see what's going on. The conclusion is written to be, therefore the sages are, and then the 4 lines. And the 4 lines in English, you can see the correspondence to the Chinese just by looking for the words in English that are repeated from 14 to 17. And you've got without the second word being the third word that are repeated all the way down from 14 to 17. So now you can identify in terms of structure the ending section and the conclusion. It starts on 13, ends with 17. So that's one section right there. And in the beginning, you can notice that with the series of 4 characters, that's actually forming a section by itself as well. So, simple way for us to turn on our X-ray vision to see the hidden structure of the Tao Te Ching is to use the Chinese and then realize that the lines are actually divided into roughly 3 sections, and there are smaller divisions within each section. So here you go. You've got the introduction, you've got the main part, and you've got the ending part. Now, there's more subtleties to this. Let me before we get to the subtlety, let me draw your attention back to 57. So remember, back in 57, we began with 3 lines that all have the same first character, and then we had, in the last section, we had, therefore, the sage says, and then followed by 4 lines. So notice the similarity between that and what we're working on today. The last section is also, therefore, the sages, and then instead of say, sages are, and then 4 lines describing the sage rulers of ancient times. Just like last time, here, when we talk about the sages, we're talking about sages who were ancient to Lao Tzu, just as Lao Tzu is ancient to us. As I pointed out before, Lao Tzu is 2,500 years ago. The ancient sages that Lao Tzu is talking about go back 4,800 years or before. So like 5,000 years ago, if you think in round numbers. So to Lao Tzu, the ancient sages to him is also 2,500 years ago. Just like for us, he is 2,500 years ago. So ancient sages like Huangdi, the legendary emperors, considered to be the founding fathers, the source of Taoism. It's actually way more ancient than Lao Tzu himself. So that is the reason why I keep saying that most encyclopedia entries have it wrong. Lao Tzu, in fact, is not the source of Taoism. He was a summarizer. He was a cataloger of existing beliefs that have been around for at least a couple thousand years. Last time, we talked about Native American spirituality. So many of the elements that we see in modern times, the the traditional beliefs of Native American spirituality that's been passed down from one generation to the next, including veneration of nature, the sacred aspect of the land, these have striking commonalities with the ancient Tao as well. So if that is the case, then the ancient Tao goes back not just 5,000 years ago, but perhaps 10,000, 20,000 years ago. Okay, so continue on. That's 57. It's also very helpful, by the way, to think about your understanding of 57 and then consider 58 to be sort of like a part 2 or sequel. So if 57 was Star Wars, 58 is Empire Strikes Back. Probably a bad analogy. All right, so back to 58. If you take a look at the middle section, I have identified in blue some of the repeating characters that you will see there. So from 5 and 6, there's actually quite a few. You can see that the second character, fourth and fifth characters, those are repeated from 5 to 6. And when you check the English, you do see a similar construction between 5 and 6. And it's the same with 9 and 10. In the English, you'll see that they're both talking about something reverting to something else. And that's how it is in the original Chinese, repeating characters. Okay, so I think that's enough about the overall structure. I think everyone wants to hear about the exact meaning, line by line. So let's have that. Let's begin. As I mentioned, I'll talk about that repeating character. I'll talk about exactly what it means, what it sounds like, etc. So the first character for line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, qi. So pinyin is qy, and that's because in the pinyin system, the q is always the ch. So it sounds like the first part of cheese, qi. And it means that, it's, there, that once, it's usually the latter. It's usually the possessive meaning. Here, qi is referring to the countries, or the kingdoms, or the nations, or the states. Now, because this is ancient times, it may be helpful for you to think of this in terms of kingdom. So this is advice to the ruler, to the king, about the kingdom. And later on, we'll talk about this being the advice to individuals, to you, who, and in fact, you are the ruler of your own private kingdom, the kingdom of your life. So we'll save that for later. So you can, if you choose to be very literal with your translation, with your version of the Tao Te Ching, you can drop in a country's or a kingdom's right where the first character is. So then the first 4 lines becomes, the country's government is lackluster, the country's people are simple and honest, the country's government is scrutinizing, the country's people are shrewd and crafty. So that would have been an accurate way to translate this chapter as well. I did it in a different way only because I wanted to make it more concise, make it sound better in English. So either way, overall concept is the same. Now remember, I talked about how lackluster is actually not a negative thing. It means a government that is easygoing, a ruling that is more relaxed, more tolerant. So that's actually a positive thing. That's what leads to people being simple and honest. Because when the government leaves you alone, you don't have a reason to use tricks to evade the government's attention. Hopefully that makes sense. So that part is kind of libertarian. And when the government is scrutinizing, that's when you have to use your shrewdness, your craftiness, your cleverness, your intelligence to figure out ways to evade the government. So it's better to be more relaxed. It's better to be less harsh, less critical. let's go a little deeper. So the first line, 奇正, 闷闷. If you take just one character by itself, it's 闷. So, and the pinyin is men, 闷. I know that in Chinese it sounds a little bit different from what you would say when you look at this. You would say men. In Chinese it's 闷, so it's a little bit different. Meaning is stuffy, muffled, and it's two characters repeating. And we notice that every line, in the first 4 lines, every line has the last 2 characters being the same. So in Chinese, you would always repeat a character twice to make an emphasis out of it, but not all characters, only some characters customarily are given that status of being repeated twice. So, for instance, the Chinese character for open is 开, and you can use that as an adjective or as a verb. So you can 开 window, or you can point to the window being open and say window 开. But you would probably say window 开. And because you want to give it the emphasis that the window or perhaps the door is wide open. So open, close, these are the common ones in Chinese where the characters get repeated twice. 开, 关, for open and close, respectively. All of these repeating characters were used in ancient times and not used in modern times. So language does evolve, but that rule of repeating characters remains. In some dialects, such as Taiwanese, for instance, which evolved from the Fujian province of China, called Minnan language, it has provisions for triple repetition. So in that dialect, you would actually, you wouldn't say open for emphasis. You would actually say open for even greater emphasis. But that's really the only example that I can think of. There are probably other ones, but they're not prevalent, they're not common, and not in Mandarin. Okay, so let's talk about the overall meaning so we figure out exactly what this is. When the government is lackluster, meaning that it's not super aggressively monitoring everything, knowing exactly what's going on. So think about this. Think about this example that I'm having here in the last bullet. Think about what kids would usually describe as a cool dad or a cool mom. Okay, so that would be a parent who has a degree of trust with the offspring. So, you know, I raised a good kid, my kid is smart, my kid knows what to do, won't get in trouble, so I trust that the kid will be okay on his or her own. Therefore, when the child is going out on a date, what the parent says is, have a great time, you know, drive safe, blah, 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 and that's it. Whereas, the flip side of the coin is a parent who is so worried about the safety, the security of the child, that, you know, that the parent would actually take extreme measures to figure out what's really going on, up to and including stalking the date, following the kids around with binoculars, you know, hey, everything okay? You know, maybe with a little walkie-talkie, you know. Okay, so those are the kind of the two sides, and I have that example actually at the bottom here. The parent who, out of a strong protective instinct, bordering on paranoia, insists on close scrutiny or monitoring of the child's state, demonstrating a lack of trust. So what can happen when a parent is that paranoid? Well, you know what's probably likely to happen is that the alienation between parent and child, the gap between parent and child will only widen. That the child will learn to not say anything about what he or she is up to the parents, and will actually figure out ways to get around the surveillance from the parents. So using that as our example, you can see exactly what Lao Tzu was talking about in the first 4 lines, that when the ruler is paranoid, people figure out all kinds of little tricks to not be paid attention to. And when the ruler is easygoing, they don't have any reason to do that, so they can be plain and simple and honest. So the ideal of the Tao is always to go toward the plain and simple and honest instead of the tricks and the deception. Okay. So the only thing that I haven't talked about in this slide is the character, the matching character. So remember I said that the first 4 lines is actually matching 1 and 3, 2 and 4. So the government is matching, the country's government, the first 2 characters match, and then we've got a character here repeated twice, meaning lackluster, and we have another character here, ta, to examine, to investigate, to look into. And when you repeat it twice, that means an aggressive kind of scrutiny, wanting to know what's going on, like a very aggressive audit. So the last line here, this is what you don't want. Whether you're dealing with a child or friends, family, loved ones, it's also what the king would not want from his subjects, and that is people shutting off channels of communication. They don't want you to know what's going on. They don't want you to know what they think, how they feel, etc. So that's the idea that we need to focus on in the first 4 lines of the Tao Te Ching. And let me give you some practical applications in everyday reality. So take a look at this last line. So, well, first of all, I'll talk about the second line for just a moment. The character that we have here, 纯, it means pure. And when you repeat it twice, you're talking about simplicity, you're talking about honesty, plainness. So, and this is, as I mentioned, this is what happens when you have someone who's easygoing and tolerant, doesn't have to know everything, and therefore you don't have any reasons for deception. And so let me talk about the last 2 repeating characters here. 缺. Now, this is where you're gonna see the oddity of the pinyin system, the pinyin romanization system. Most native English speakers, when they look at this, will say, "Oh, Q. Okay, I know what that is. Now I know how to sound this out." No, it's actually 缺. So this is one of the weaknesses of the pinyin system. Remember what I said before, the pinyin system was created by scholars who themselves don't have native fluency in both English and Chinese, and therefore the system they created is very imperfect. It's an improvement over what it replaced, but it's not perfect. So here I have sort of my attempt to give you the correct pronunciation. 缺. It's like chu followed by a, but they run closely together. 缺. And it means a flaw. So if you have a ceramic plate and it has a part of it chipped off, 缺, you can point that and say that's a flaw with the plate. That's a deficiency. You can also apply that character to a person in terms of personality, that person's integrity. If you say 缺, that you're pointing to 缺点 is a point, a weakness in that person's character. So it's a flaw in that person. When you repeat it twice, it means, in ancient times, it actually meant being clever, being shrewd. Now, in the West, we see shrewdness, craftiness as being somehow positive, a little bit positive, because while it's a smart person who can be shrewd, we can say, oh, he's a shrewd businessman. And it's not positive. It's not as positive as he's a business genius. That's all positive. But if you say he's a shrewd businessman, you're actually giving him a bit of a compliment that he knows what he's doing and that he can make deals that are beneficial for himself. So here, in this context, it's not positive at all because the idea is that it's shrewdness in terms of being devious, in terms of being deceptive, tricky. So it's a misuse, it's a flaw in one's character leading to the misuse of intelligence. That's why it's considered to be deficient. Moving on. So I think already in the first 4 lines, we're delving into this chapter at a level of depth and detail that probably you won't be able to find anywhere else, and there's more. So let's think about the overall idea encapsulated in the first 4 lines. This can be seen as advice to a ruler, a king or a queen. So applied to a nation or a kingdom, when the government gets out of people's lives, not interfere, the people have no reason to make things complicated or to be dishonest. And remember, complexity and dishonesty is only needed when people resist oppression or totalitarian control. When that gets to be too much, when tyrannical oppression gets to be too much, you have underground resistance. So, and that's the ultimate form of being cut off, being isolated, having no communication, working in secrecy. So, and that's why I have this bullet point here. In a police state, you had to be shrewd and crafty. You had to figure out ways to hide from surveillance and evade the authorities. So minimizing interference is better for the ruler and for the subjects. So from the perspective of government, I think we can see that it's beneficial all around. People spend way less time trying to figure out ways, trying to figure out tricks to, it's sort of like that Mad Magazine Spy versus Spy thing, if you guys recall. You know, they're conflicting with one another. Viola just kind of dates us. We're like the same age. Okay, so, but let's think about, instead of a nation, what about you as a ruler of your life? Let me offer this. Apply to your life. When you avoid excessive meddling, others have no reason to keep things from you. So now the second bullet, this I want to really highlight for everyone because I see this so much at the workplace. Those of you who are involved in corporate America, climbing the corporate ladder, you know what I'm talking about. You hear this quite a bit from different sources. Why wasn't I told? You know, that's pretty ominous. Usually in a work setting, that's the sign of trouble. And the red flag, even more of a red flag, if you're the person who says it. If you are getting all upset and then you are quizzing people, you are asking people, look at this, why wasn't I told? Okay, I want to say that if you have to utter that phrase, it's time to review and reflect upon yourself to see if you are truly living up to the Tao ideal. When you say, why wasn't I told? You have to reflect on this particular chapter and realize that, have I become sort of the tyrannical ruler that people want to avoid? And that's why they don't tell me what's going on? So here's what I have seen. Every time I hear, why wasn't I told, it's always from people who consistently make things more troublesome or difficult for others, who complicate things. Because they do that, because they make things more complicated, because they're likely to point the accusing finger of blame, people figure out ways to get stuff done without that person's involvement. Now later on, it comes to light, that person is unhappy, hence, why wasn't I told? So that's why if you trace it back to the source, you realize what's causing it. So, and every time I see this, I hear this phrase being uttered, I see people trying to fix it by being more scrutinizing. Literally, I see that what they will do is that they'll open up their email software, and then they'll look at an email, not just the body of the email, but they will scroll down to look at all the quoted past emails, which can be very lengthy, but they will actually take the time to trace back a couple of weeks worth of communication just to identify at what point were they left out of the loop. And then they want to pinpoint that, take it to HR with a sternly worded either warning or complaint, depending on their position. So looking for reasons to get mad, looking for reasons to have a really bad day when you realize that your team doesn't want you to be involved. So I want to say that I also want to say that I have never seen that work for anyone. Usually, when someone says that, why wasn't I told? I can anticipate that in a year or two, they will no longer be in that position or at that place. And that's because it is a sign that they have not done well in terms of their relationship with other people. Think about a reverse situation. Think about someone who's not like that, but someone who is always consistently helpful, who's always making things simpler, easier for other people. You can imagine that all the co-workers will love that person. And whenever they have a problem, they will say, what would he do? Or what does she think? We need his help. We need her input. Even when that person is not directly involved, they will figure out ways to get that person involved because that person is an asset to the team. So that person actually has the opposite problem, and that is the problem of popularity. Everybody wants you to be on their team. And that's when you know you have succeeded as a person. People like you. They want you to be involved with what they're working on. So the only solution, men, together, it's the fourth pitch. Ancient Chinese, or take a chill pill. In ancient China, they did not have refrigeration, so they did not have chill pills. Closest that they could do to chill anything would be to lower something into a deep well and using the cold water of the well to chill it. So what the ancient Chinese might do, as an example, could be that they would lower fruits into a deep well to chill it down, and that makes it more delicious. Only the very powerful, like royalty, will be in a position to command people to go high up in the mountains to fetch blocks of ice and then bring it down quickly before it all melts back into the palace. And also, I was mentioning to Master William just now, about half an hour ago, the difference between the Eastern zombie apocalypse and the Western zombie apocalypse. You guys probably don't know what the difference is, so I'll tell you. As I mentioned previously, there's a lot of times I like to do a little bit on the East versus West, Asians versus American. There are some differences that you probably have never seen before. So in the West, you already know what zombies are like. And you can probably all mime a zombie right now. And as I'm saying this, there's a lot of people listening online, and they're probably all doing this, right? So you know what zombies are like, moving slowly. Now, it's not always like that. There's a certain kind of zombie, like World War Z. I don't know if you guys saw that, with Brad Pitt, where the zombies are like, rapid. They are moving very quickly. But usually, especially like in video games, zombies have to move slowly to accommodate your aiming and shooting your weapon in the video game to take them down. So in the Asian version of zombies, yes, they also reanimate corpse. Is that, legend has it that there's a certain kind of magic, certain kind of power that can be used to animate a corpse. Then what the zombie will do is to hop. Now, the Western audience will find that to be extremely funny, like the hopping zombie. And what the ancient Chinese would do, sometimes you see it in some martial arts epics that has magical elements, is that there's a whole bunch of people that have died. They all need to be moved back to their hometown, the home village, which is, like 100 miles away. So rather than to carry them, the characters in the story will hire, this priest who will use the magic to animate the corpse. So they will get in line, they will very obediently all hop toward the destination. See, I knew you didn't have that visual about zombies, but that's how it is in Asian legends. One of the interesting differences that people don't know about between East and West. Okay, so main point here, figure out how to be genuinely helpful. Figure out how not to interfere and be helpful when you are asked to be helpful. Many of you don't really have this problem at all. Many of you are swamped with people asking for help. That's a great sign. That means that you are not line 3. You are more like line 1. Okay, so let's keep going. We have about 10 minutes, so we can do a few more slides, and then we have to jump to the conclusion or the summary for today. We won't be able to finish the whole chapter today. So let's talk about misfortune and fortune, beginning with line 5. And let's begin with the first character of line 5, Huo. So pinyin, H-U-O, okay, that's fairly close. Huo. It means disaster, misfortune, setback, problems, calamity. And then its opposite, Fu. Fu, this character you will see frequently in Chinese New Year celebration. So everyone in a Chinese New Year celebration is wishing good fortune on one another. So Fu, good fortune, prosperity. And by the way, pinyin, F-U, Fu, this is not the same as the Fu in Kung Fu. It's a completely different character. And in Chinese, it's a different pitch. Different character sounding at a different pitch. So in Chinese, when I say Kung Fu, I would say Gong Fu. So it's Fu. Here, it's Fu. So it's a difference between Fu and Fu. I don't know how obvious that difference is to a native English speaker because English doesn't follow the same tonal rules of different pitches. So Fu, prosperity, good fortune. So here's the idea. Misfortune is what fortune depends upon. Fortune is where misfortune hides beneath. What it's saying is that we think of fortune, good luck, misfortune, bad luck, as opposites. The ancient Chinese thought of them as the two sides of the same coin, that they are connected. The existence of one guarantees the potential of the other. Let's parse it out for just a moment. The existence of one, let's think about good fortune. Having good fortune guarantees the potential for bad fortune. Why is that? It's because when you are enjoying your good fortune, oh, I just got a promotion, oh, I just got a raise, oh, I have a windfall, or I'm encountering this and that, great things happening in my life, I'm so happy. You could get easily too caught up in the moment and lose your head. I'm the greatest. Yes, I did it. It's all because of me, 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 me. So that arrogance would then plant a seed of your downfall. So that is how the potential for misfortune can exist at the same time as the existence, the actuality of good fortune. So the other way, let's parse it out the other way. Suppose you are suffering through some bad fortune now, some misfortune right now. Things are not going well. You know, oh, I have so many problems going on. I am really suffering. I'm unhappy. I'm depressed. Okay. Now, that may be where you stop thinking, but from the Tao perspective, you would say that, well, here, when you've hit rock bottom, you have the potential to rise. You have the potential to learn from the setbacks, the problems that are manifesting, and then figure out a way to get back up on your feet, which will lead to good fortune once again. So think about that for a moment. And let's move on. So there are stories in the Tao tradition specifically about that. So fortune, good fortune, bad fortune, I compare them to the ups and downs in the roller coaster of life. The untrained mind will see the ups and downs as diametrically opposite. You, as a cultivator of the Tao, I hope you will see that the ups and downs in the roller coaster of life, it's the same set of rails going up and down. And it's actually linked to one another. It's all linked continuously. If you didn't go up, you wouldn't be going down, and vice versa. So they are connected states, and they continuously transition or transform into one another. So like the swing of a pendulum, or like the yin and yang symbol constantly rotating. So here, the graphic that I have, this is the cover of my book, The Tao of Daily Life. I'm told this is a very romantic book. So I have two editions here. This is the book edition. It's mostly red, and then the Kindle edition is brown in color. Now, chapter 8 of the Tao of Daily Life is called Misfortunes and Blessings. And this is a well-known story in Chinese called Sai Wong Shi Ma, about this frontiersman who loses his horse. That story is one of the popular ones. It's actually something that's been told and retold in the West as well, because it's a cool story. It's talking about this frontiersman losing his horse. Everybody thinks that it's misfortune, but then his elderly grandfather says, well, who knows if it's not something else in disguise. And then the horse came back with another horse. So in ancient China, that represents a doubling of your total assets. So this was a very good thing. Everyone is congratulating the family. And again, the old man says, well, who knows if this is perhaps a bad thing. So then, the son is trying to break in the new horse, falls from the horse, breaks his leg, gets injured badly. Bad fortune again. People come to express a condolence. And again, the old man says, well, who knows? And then war breaks out with the barbarians from beyond the border. So people are conscripted into an army, except the son, who cannot go because of the broken leg. So good fortune. Now, the story ends there in the traditional Chinese, but you can imagine how it could even be further extended. Okay? So people come to express, envy to the family. Your son doesn't have to go to war. What a great fortune that is. And the old man again will say, well, who knows, perhaps, And it may be that the army wins a tremendous victory. So everyone that joined the army partakes in the bounty of a grateful king, except the son who could not go into battle because of the broken leg. So bad fortune again, right? And it could go on and on like that. You could devise different plot twists back and forth, back and forth. It can go on, but the point is made. The point is that you can't really tell. The point is exactly what we see in 7 and 8. Who knows the ultimate end? They have no determined outcome. Because that story is so well told and well known and also gets distorted oftentimes, I decided when I wrote The Life is to bring out the original, dust it off, and then open it up, consult the original Chinese, and translate directly from the original to get the truest version possible. And so that's what you have in the Tao of Daily Life. If you see a version where the details are different from what I have written, then you can best believe that that's a distorted version. I think that's okay, as long as the point is made that you don't want to get too fixated on good luck, bad luck. Instead, you want to look at what is happening and how you individually can benefit from that. I'm having good fortune now. What is this telling me? How do I conserve? How do I make this last? How do I save for a rainy day? Or I'm experiencing bad fortune now. What am I meant to learn from this experience? How can I be a better person emerging from this experience? So that story is almost tailor-made for lines 5 to 8. So still quite a bit more of the chapter to talk about, but we now need to jump to the very end. Because we are at the end of our meeting. Time flies. Hey, it's actually 12:30 right now. So remember, everyone, the spiritual path of Guandao cultivation is open to everybody. So if you feel that it may be the right time for you to seek the Tao, you just let me know, and I will do whatever I can to help. Which, by the way, what it means is that I'll say, hey, Master William, somebody needs to receive the Tao. That's it. Then my work is done. Okay, so reminder for everyone, next week, the 31st, last meeting in July, we're coming back to continue talking about 58. We should be able to complete our discussion on 58 next Sunday. And looking a month ahead, we have the memorial coming up. So let's zoom to the summary. We haven't talked about these 4 lines yet. They are from the very end of this particular chapter. For now, let's just scan my attempt to describe what it says. You will find that the very end of the chapter is actually calling back to the original, so the circle is complete. So I talked about how if you're too scrutinizing, like a police state, like Big Brother, then you alienate other people. So this is what this first line is about. So you can act with honor, you can have honor within, you can be the honorable person, not the difficult person. Here, I am referring to people who consider themselves to be very honorable, and they require everyone else to follow the code that they also follow, and that tends to turn people off. So be the honorable person. You can be that without being a difficult person to be with. And number 2, you want to follow your own rules. Number 2 is very similar to number 1, but you don't want to demand the same for the others. Why? Well, they're their own individuals. They have their own paths to follow. Maybe they don't, behave up to your standards. That's on them. What you do is on yourself. So that's the wisdom from the sages. Number 3, yes, you want to be honest. You can be straightforward. You can be direct. You can be candid, even blunt. You can be all of that without being cruel. So here's something that I want to say to everyone that I'll repeat again next time. I hear this a lot. I hear the phrase, hey, I'm just being honest. We hear that all the time. I have never heard that phrase said with genuine good intentions. It's usually following something really damaging. Example might be like body shaming, okay? Body shaming someone, and then, hey, I'm just being honest. What you're trying to do is that you want to be hurtful and you want to escape the consequences of being hurtful. So you can be honest, you can be straightforward without being cruel. So I hope that for everyone, you will think about that. Next time you feel the need to say, hey, I'm just being honest, you want to rewind back a few minutes and think about if perhaps you were being cruel. Lastly, aspire to be the illumination that dispels darkness for other people, be their guiding light without blinding them with the glare of your brilliance. I know everybody who's listening in, I know a lot of people that are listening, you're a great group. You are brilliant, mentally brilliant. The danger is that you are so brilliant that you can be blinding. So you want to be gentle. When you interact with people who don't know as much as you do, you want to be the guiding light and not the blinding light. So that's it for our discussion on this chapter 58 today. Let's go
ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架跪德是一鞠躬，接班一鞠躬。Okay, everybody, we are done.
Participate in the Tao meeting by joining us online. For information, go to taoism.net/Tao